Begin Podfix Network transmission. In 3, 2, 1.
Whether you're fly fishing in a stream, getting those ankles wet, or deep in the ocean casting nets, fish nerds. Fish nerds. Fish nerds. It's a podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Fish Nerds, a show about fish, fishing, and eating fish. Show that's always interesting, usually funny, and mostly true. I'm Clay Groves, Chief Executive Fish Nerd, Licensed Fishing Guide, your best friend. Big show tonight. Tim, Bete, and the Crappie Hippie are here. They're here with their segment called Lure Love. It's growing in popularity. If you don't know it already, you're going to love it. We're excited about this. They're going to talk a little bit about Z-Man lures and then WD-40. What does WD-40 have to do with fishing lures? They're going to tell you all about it. And then Rich Collins is here with Jeff from Brackish Flies, and they're going to talk all things Brook Trout. So let's not waste time. Let's jump right in to Lure Love and get this going on.
Lure Love, I can't get enough. Got a space in my tackle box, just got to fill it up. Lure Love, I can't ever stop. Don't got a basement, got an underground tackle shop.
Good evening, everybody. This is Crappie Hippie, your tree-hugging redneck from eastern Kansas, and thank you for tuning in to Lure Love. And with me tonight is outdoor writer, Fish Nerd's own essayist, Tim Bete. How you doing tonight, Tim?
I am great, John. How are you?
I'm doing great, and I've been doing better. Hey, you got us into this Z-Man challenge thing, brother, and I got all my baits, and I got my stuff, and I ran right out and gave them a try. Have you gotten a chance to get out and try?
I did, and I can tell you I am super excited about this challenge. So for all of this year, when I fish soft baits, I'm only going to fish these Z-Man Elastec baits. And the reason is they're biodegradable. I love fishing plastics, but I'm not a big fan of losing plastics. And so I actually caught my first fish of the year using the Elastec, and actually caught a bass through the ice, John, but from shore. I took a big rock, I threw it into the middle of the pond so it punched a hole in it, and I cast a jig on a float, reeled it over the ice till the jig fell in, and yanked a bass out of that hole with one of the Z-Man. So I thought that was a good way to start the year.
That is so brilliant. That is so 10-year-old inventive, brilliant. It reminds me of something I'd read in one of your essays, as a matter of fact. Yeah, that's fantastic, man. That's fantastic. Well, mine's a little more conventional. I just grabbed one of the Ned heads and they had one called Trick Shot. And it's kind of between a fluke and a short plastic worm. And I just love the look of it. But the main thing is it's called Meat Dog. It's got purple and gray. I don't know, I kept picturing this purple dog the whole time I was fishing. But anyway, went down, just did your standard Ned thing where I just would let it set and wiggle it a little bit and let it set till my patience wore out. Then I move it. But caught me a nice chunk pound bass. But when I looked at the picture, the mouth on that bass is so small and the fish was so fat. And I realized that all the advice that the pond lady's been giving me is starting to pay off in terms of pond improvement and so forth. And then I nailed a crappie that wasn't more than probably 11, 12 inches long, but Lord have mercy, that thing was so thick through the back. So I know all this brush I've been putting in and all these different things I've been doing to enhance the habitat. She's always in favor of those long-term fixes rather than just throwing out food or doing this, during the quickies.
When you have that right habitat, then the environment's going to take care of itself. You're going to have the small minnows, the structure for them to hide, for the structure for the bass to ambush and everything like that. So yeah, it makes a big difference. I'm in the process of doing that for my pond too.
But to tie it back to Z-Man, I love these. These are weedless Ned heads. I was fishing in some locust brush. I sent you some pictures of it, and it's serious brush, but I came through it without a problem, and the bait caught the two fish, and the bait was able to navigate the locust needles. So we get these nice biodegradable baits, get a nice plastic bait that supposedly can last 1 to 200 fish. And that's my thing. I'm going to be taking fish count and how they compare with what I used to use, how they compare with what glass water sells. I got a story for you. You want to hear what Kathy laid on me too?
Yeah, tell me.
She was really thought all the baits were cool. And then she saw the heads and she goes, are these lead? You know, so she goes from being this giggly girl. Oh, look at this purple one. Look at this funny name. You know, what's TRD mean and all this stuff. And she's like, are these jig heads lead? And I was like, yeah. She goes, you're the co-founder of Glasswater Angling, you know, lead-free lures for better outdoors. She goes, you can't fish with these. Okay. I go, well, what am I supposed to do? Because I can't get the hooks. I can't make the heads. You know, you are going to make lead-free heads out of these. And anyway, so now I get to make a mold and melt the lead off, preserve the hook, and then put it in my mold and then recast it.
Well, that's good, John, because one of the things I love the Z-Man Ned heads because of the welded keeper hook that they have, which is really exceptional. And, you know, they've already done this with the Last Tech and looking at the environment. And who knows, maybe by talking about this, they'll move and do some research and create their own lead head because they obviously have a good jig there already. So maybe you can do some research for them.
You know, just like that keeper you're talking about, that is a keeper like no other. It makes it almost impossible for that bait to back off the hook. Yet when you go the other way, it doesn't just rip it to heck. This is definitely low profile aluminum wheel, baby. This is a really good keeper. All right, man. Hey, you know, we've been talking a lot about this new baits and a new tech, but you got a story, a great story I saw in the Fish Nerds Facebook group. And if you're not in the group, get in the group, folks. It's real easy. We're having a good time over there. Anyhow, you came across some vintage fishing lures and wow, it's just awesome. Tell us all about it. Great story, great batch of lures. What's going on, bro?
Yeah, I got one of the best presents I have ever received in my life. So I grew up fishing with my Uncle Larry, and we fished mostly for bass using typical equipment, spinning equipment, bait casting gear. But as Larry got older, he began to fly fish almost exclusively. So recently he asked me if I would like some of his old bass lures that he had in his basement. And obviously I said, send them. I definitely want to see these, but I had no idea what amazing things I would find in the box he sent to me. This was like a treasure chest. Some of the lures were more than 40 years old. I had some matching ones because sometimes we would buy the same lures, and I had a few, but there was well over 100 lures in the box. And what's funny about this is Larry, when I was growing up, he would fly fish and spin fish, bait casting. He kind of did everything. But one Christmas, we had a Christmas party where we all picked names out of a hat who you buy the present for. And I got Larry, and I got him a graphite fly rod that he still has to this day. So I think it's a good strategy. You want somebody to buy a lot of these lures, get them into fly fishing, so 40 years later, they'll give you all their lures back. It's a very good investment. But John, let me tell you what was in the box, just some of them. And some of these were new, still in boxes. So there were some Rapala Fat Wrap still in their boxes. There was an Uncle Buck's Buzzer, which is an inline topwater still in the package. There were some Strike King and Mepps Bass Killer spinner baits in their packages. Then there were things like old Jitterbugs from Fred Arbogast, who was right here in Ohio. That's where they were made. There was an old one of those Creek Chub wooden jointed pikey lures with a metal lip, some Zara Spooks, hula poppers, you name it. And so I am having a ball going through these because there's so many of them. But one of the things that I began to think about was, well, when you get these old lures or even just lures in general, how do you clean them? Because some people are collectors. I'm going to fish these. I love fishing these old things, but I need to make sure that they were in good shape, looking at the hooks, making sure you got some dirt, because some of these had been in Larry's basement for 20 years. So they were pretty covered with kind of with gunk and filth.
And you get the different categories. I mean, you're exactly right. First of all, you're going to go fish with an old lure, look at the hooks. I mean, it's great to find an old spinnerbait along the edge of the lake, but then if you look in the hooks, get your eyeglass kit out and undo those little screws and take those mounts off and clean them up, get a new treble on there. But I know one of the tricky things you did was get that oxidation off there. The only way, and everybody knows, it's that powdery white looking kind of stuff, and you can get it with a pencil eraser, and you can get it with even with your thumb if you just sit there and rub it long enough. But unless you take the time to take all the hooks off and really bear down on it with the rag, I mean, even soap and water has a real challenging time. But I heard that you came up with a secret method on that stuff.
I did, and you're right, John. There's a couple of things you got to clean. You got to clean the lure body, but you got the hooks, the split ring, the oxidation. And so I did a little bit of research, and I tested some different things. And what I found is a product that's in 80% of our listeners' homes already, that you have this in your closet someplace. And I think it's the best way to clean lures. And I'm going to give you a little bit of history about it, but the product is WD-40.
WD-40.
The multi-use, it's their standard version. Now, most people think WD-40 is a lubricant because, for squeaks and stuff. And it is in part, but WD-40 literally stands for water displacement 40th formula. So that's the name that came straight out of the lab book that the chemists used in 1953, a guy named Norm Larson. He was attempting to develop a formula to prevent corrosion. And how do you prevent corrosion? By displacing water, getting water off of something. And so his persistence paid off, and it was his 40th try. Now, the company was called Rocket Chemical Company. They were putting together rust prevention solvents and degreasers for use in the aerospace industry. This is one of their first products, and it was to protect the outer skin of the Atlas missile.
Whoa.
Isn't that cool?
Wow.
And the product worked so well that some of the employees were sneaking cans out of the plant to use at home. Right. So WD-40 has anti-corrosion agents. It penetrates, it displaces water, and it removes soil. So it's designed to get under dirt, grime, and grease. It's also designed to loosen rust to metal bonds. So you got your rusty hooks on there that are something that's frozen. And it also protects metal surfaces from future corrosion. So it's perfect for cleaning lures. And better than that, it's safe on most plastics, rubbers, and vinyls.
But that's the part that would have scared me.
Right.
I knew it was a solvent. So I'm like, I ain't spraying this on no, 60-year-old, 50-year-old lure, but
it works on most of them as well as the metals. And the cans have not contained CFCs for more than 30 years. So the can's even environmentally friendly. So it really works well. But what's interesting is when you go to their website, and I did some research, you look at what else they use it for. And it's things that people don't think about. So spraying it on your snow shovel to keep snow from sticking in, to protect it from salt. Cleaning stainless steel sinks. It's a great cleaner for stainless steel.
Wow.
So you don't have to worry when you clean out your lures and you rinse them in the sink. This isn't a bad solvent that's going out. It's designed for that. Or cleaning tar and bugs from your car. The funny thing is, people use it for so many different uses that WD-40 on their website has a document, 2,000 uses sent in by users. And listen to some of these, John.
All right.
It keeps snake and reptile skins pliable in taxidermy.
Okay.
Removes residue left by double-backed toupee tape. Protects and maintains armor suits. Removes barnacles from the bottom of boats. Keeps tackle from freezing during ice fishing. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Keeps lures from snagging on lily pads and lake grass. And refurbishes antique lures. So it actually says on the website that's one of the uses. There's a lot of myths about WD-40. One of them is that you find online is some people think that it contains fish oil. And the reason is, if you go to YouTube, a lot of people say that WD-40 is a fish attractant, and they use it as a fish attractant, which I do not recommend it for. It may work that way, but you don't want to be spraying the stuff in your pond, your river, your lake. But the WD-40 actually says that consumers have told them over the years that they've caught some of the biggest fish after protecting their fish hooks and lures with it. But here's my thought. With a lot of solvents, John, as you know, it might clean the lure, but it might have a smell and a residue that repulses the fish. So in this case, you at least don't have to worry about that. You don't want to use it as an attractant, but it's not going to be a repellent for fish.
That's great. No, that is a huge concern. There's so much anecdotal and some science about fish smelling stuff and being either attracted or repelled. There's a lot there. I would be concerned.
Two of the uses that I think have some fishing applications. These are true stories that people sent in that were particularly funny. One was there was a bus driver in Asia who had a python that had coiled itself around the undercarriage of the bus, and he sprayed it with WD-40 and it slipped off.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So my thought is, if you're ever deep sea fishing and a giant octopus attacks you, you just got to spray it with that WD-40.
Yeah. It's got to be in everybody's kit.
One of the other stories where there's some police officers who had responded to a burglar breaking into a building, and the burglar was trapped in the air conditioning duct.
Oh.
By the way, he was naked. So they sprayed WD-40 to pull him out. So my thought is, if you're ever fishing too much in the morning and you're late for work and you got to sneak into your office through the ducts, bring your WD-40 with you.
You're just pushing your clothes ahead of you, Oh, man. Well, that is fascinating, Tim. That is absolutely cool.
So let me tell you let me walk you through the process. It's just pretty quick. But what I did is I got an empty 2-liter plastic soda bottle and I cut off the bottom. And the reason is those 2-liter bottles have 5 small indentations in the bottom, which are perfect to kind of dangle the hooks in as they soak. And so then you can use less WD-40. You don't have to spray it in. And so you're immersing the entire lure. So I would put the lure into the bottom. I'd spray both sides and then make sure the indentations had enough WD-40 to cover the hooks and the split rings. And I let them sit for an hour or two, depending on how dirty they were.
Okay.
But as you said before, John, you can remove the hooks and split rings if you want them to soak separately, and that can be a good idea. You definitely need a decent pair of split ring pliers to get those hooks off, especially when they're rusty. Now, for bigger split rings, I don't have a problem, but do you have any tips? I use a lot of small split rings, and sometimes even the small split ring pliers are tough to get in there and get hooks on and off. Any tips on that?
Well, the only tip I would have is I use split rings down to double aught, which are about as small as you can get. And I use what are called Xuron, Xuron, Xuron split ring pliers. They've got baby blue handles, and they're a little more. I've seen them as cheap as 10. I've seen them as much as 20. When you're looking for the top quality wrench, the top quality tool for this, try Xuron pliers, because the jaws are fine, but they're made out of a real good metal that, I've put together close to 5,000 baits, and that's 10,000 split rings. And that's a testimonial for Xuron right there.
Yeah, I figured you would know. Well, that's good. I'm going to pick up a pair of those because I have a cheaper pair, and on the small split rings, it doesn't work as well.
Right.
So then after it's been soaking a while, I got a soft toothbrush, not a hard bristle one, because you don't want to, damage these or rip the paint off of them. And so personally, I use an electric toothbrush. So whenever I go to the dentist, I always ask for, hey, give me a couple more of those samples so I can brush my teeth. And then I use them for projects like this.
All right.
Then after it's all done, you rinse the lure body and the hooks. I just rinse them under the faucet because I'm cleaning the sink at the same time. And then after the hooks are dry, I really kind of examine them. They often need to be sharpened. So you can buy a hook sharpener for $10. That's a critical piece of it, even if they look good. If they don't look good, then I bought some extra split rings and single inline hooks or some treble hooks and put those on. And in many cases, you're as good as new.
It sounds like all the steps I'd take. It's no point in going through all this time and tackle and preparation and having the, killer rod and reel, and then the lure you're throwing has dull hooks, or a hook that's going to break, or a ring that's going to break or come open or whatever. So make sure you get an eye to those details. So your vintage lure goes out and performs just like something that was made yesterday.
Yeah. And some of these just look amazing.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. That looks like Dawn of the Dead, the lure.
Yeah. So this is an old black jitterbug. That's the top. You can see it's so oxidized. The bottom of it, you can hardly even tell that it's black. And this is just the WD-40 and the toothbrush. That's the top of it. You can see all the lettering.
Oh, it's beautiful.
And there's the bottom of it.
Yeah, no,
Perfect condition.
It's great condition. It's just unbelievable because the one thing really did look like it had been taken out of the crypt from 2,000 years ago, and now it looks just great. Just looks like 1965 all over again.
I see no reason, if you have a lure that maybe it's only a few years old, but you've been doing some hard fishing with it and it's dirty, this is a quick way to do it, especially when you start to get some of that surface rust. The WD-40 will take that surface rust right off.
Man, that is fantastic and incredible. All righty. Well, listen, thank you so much for all those tips. That was just awesome. I mean, I got so buzzed looking at that stuff, and it wasn't even mine. And then when you started putting up how you were bringing, a lot of it looked good and was in great shape. But yeah, there were some real zombies in there. And now they look good as ever. So thanks for cluing us in and talking us through on how to make sure those vintage lures are brought back to fish catching perfection.
Let's go to the Lure-matic computer for a second and see what she has to say about WD-40.
Let's do it.
Greetings, flesh-bound fisher dudes. I have been listening to your discussion of WD-40. You got so excited about it that you sounded a bit like a late-night infomercial. With that in mind, I have produced a WD-40 advertisement especially for the Fish Nerds podcast. Here it goes. Are you afraid to show strangers your musky minnow because it's so muddy? Do you hide your flying hellgrammite when your in-laws visit because it's stained? Are you embarrassed that your Hinkle lizard has lost its luster? Is your supersonic shiner soiled? Hi, I'm the Lure-matic computer and I'm here to tell you about WD-40, the miracle cleaner that will have your creek chub plunker plunking and your mud puppy barking in no time. WD-40, the high-tech cleaning agent used by astronauts, is your road to a cleaner, happier tackle box. Imagine your adoring cheering fans as you win the fishing tournament and take home a new boat.
Hey, that could be me.
No regular cleaner can do that. And imagine all your fishing dreams coming true.
Wow, someone sent me 10 free fishing rods in the mail.
And what about those pesky fish and game wardens?
I was going to cite you for fishing without a license, but your lures are so clean, I'm going to let you off and also give you $50.
Just spray your filthy lures with WD-40 and your life will be transformed.
Hey, my hair is growing back.
Whether you're a pro, a noob or a weekend warrior, WD-40 is for you. Remember, nothing cleans your supersonic shiner like WD-40. Call now and get a free Fish Nerds ball cap. But that's not all. We'll also send you half a tuna sandwich the Crappie Hippie left in his tackle bag for a week. But I'm still not done. Call right now and we'll double the offer. That's right, 2 cans of WD-40, 2 Fish Nerds caps, and 2 tuna sandwich halves.
Wait, that's an entire tuna sandwich.
That's right, an entire tuna sandwich. Call now to order.
We're sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.
Well, that was hilarious. That is awesome, Tim. I love the Lure-matic computer. All right, everybody. Thank you all for tuning in to Lure Love tonight. This is John King, the Crappie Hippie, co-founder of Glasswater Angling, your tree-hugging redneck from eastern Kansas, with outdoor writer and Fish Nerds essayist Tim Bete saying tight lines and Valentines. Peace out.
Okay, well, that was really fun. Thank you, John King. And thank you so much, Tim Bete, as well. Talking about WD-40, I used to, as a kid, we used to fish out in CQ, Washington, out in Washington State. And we'd be trolling for salmon. I remember we woke up early one super duper early day and went out trolling for salmon, looking for the king salmon, Chinooks. And they weren't biting. We heard on the radio that if you spray WD-40 on your lures, you will attract these fishes. And so we tried it. And after hours of not catching fish, we squirted this on our lures, and we immediately got our limit of Chinook salmon. I think I was probably 12 or 13, maybe 14, when we did this. So my memory's pretty strong, but memories are bananas anyway, so you can't trust it. But that's what we used WD-40 of as a kid. So I'm not recommending it. I don't know what it does to the environment, so don't do it. I didn't tell you it. It just didn't happen. Anyway, that is Lure Love, our really good segment there with the Crappie Hippie and with Tim Bete. Oh, yes. Time to sell you things here at the Fish Nerds Podcast. Support for the Fish Nerds is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision engineering tools for your family jewels. Manscaped is trusted by over 2 million men worldwide. Join the movement for all your below-the-waist grooming needs. So there you go. Manscaped has sent me their lawnmower 3.0, and I did try it out in the shower, and it is waterproof, and it's got a ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents, which is good news for me because I'm a clumsy guy. And I trimmed up my hairs on my family jewels. It also came with some nice cleaning equipment. It has a nice LED light, so you can just do a nice close job of it. And I'm not going to tell you the outcome because I'm still here and I am in one piece. But if you've been considering getting a trimmer, please consider getting Manscaped. Go to manscaped.com. Manscaped.com. You get 20% off and free shipping with the code FISHNERDS. Again, get 20% off and free shipping with the code FISHNERDS at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com with the code FISHNERDS. Your balls, or your significant other person's balls, will thank you. Why do I do it? I don't know why I'm doing this. All right. And we're super excited, too, because we have our very good friend, Rich Collins, our fly fishing correspondent with us tonight. And he's got an interview with Jeff from Brackish Flies. And they're going to talk all things Brook Trout. And this is a kind of a free-form conversation. And you could join in with them and listen in and go on our Facebook group and make some comments to Rich about what you think about it. And we're going to jump right in with that. And that'll be the whole show tonight. So when that's over, it's done. Next week on the podcast, you're going to hear a discussion on the culture of ice fishing. That'll be a lot of fun. I got to be a member of a panel at the Brattleboro Museum of Art in Brattleboro, Vermont, about ice fishing, and I'm very excited about that. So you're going to hear that on next week's podcast. Let's jump right into this interview with Rich Collins and Jeff from Brackish Flies.
Hey, fish nerds, this is Rich. I am here with my friend Jeff from Brackish Flies, and we are going to talk about brook trout, the good, the bad, and the ugly, or whatever we really feel like talking about. How you doing, Jeff?
Doing well, Rich. Thank you so much for having me on tonight. It's great to be back. Been a minute. Missed you guys.
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah, it's been a rather crazy year, and but I did get fish a lot. Did you?
I got out a good amount. I don't think. There are certain people that myself included, that might not have gotten out as much as we would have liked, just because of all the silliness of the year. But I've got high hopes for 2021.
Yeah. It's going to be a good year. It's got to be a good year.
It's got to be better than last year in any case.
But I am wondering how the brook trout are doing. I want to talk about brook trout. I want to talk about brookies. I want to talk about why they're fascinating. I don't know if it's because I'm an East Coast kid or what, but they're just the best fish. And that's what I want to talk about.
Well, I'm all the more glad that you got me on for this, because I think that they're my number one fish as well. There's just something about brook trout, the places we find them, their individual beauty, their feistiness and willingness to take a fly. It's such a complete experience as offered by a fish and the region that we're in. Like you said, I think a part of it is the fact that we're Northeast boys, and that we have such a love for this part of the country and the nature. And it's just, I think about the places that I go to find these fish and how they remain untouched, to some extent more than others, of course, or that they're functions of large amounts of time and financial investment to restore habitat and restore populations and narrow stream beds and plant good woody structure and shore up the banks. The list goes on and on and on. But I think we're absolutely privileged to sort of a whole other level than the rest of the country.
And they are among us. They're in, I don't know, one of the most productive spots in New Hampshire is in the middle of a city, I guess. For some reason, there's a ton of fish in one little neighborhood in the city. They're resilient little suckers, and it's amazing.
That's unbelievable to think about. And it's not just that they're in that place, but in New Hampshire in particular, I feel like you can almost put a map up on the wall, chuck a dart, and if you hit a blue line, you can go to it and stand a pretty good chance of finding trout. Now, whether the state happened to stock them over a potential wild population there is
a different story.
Right. That's a horse of another color, isn't it? But that's this is sort of a battle that New Hampshire, I think, is fighting much more so than Massachusetts as far as the stocking of artificial fish over wild fish.
The problem is our development is just starting. That habitat is it's been semi-protected only because people haven't wanted to come here. And it's all built out in mass, but it's not all built out here. So you see these farms and these kind of really special places that are being sold for, good money. And you'd be silly not to sell your farm to put in a housing development, but I digress. But there's a threat here, and it's a big one. And someone's got to think about it long-term and step up, which may or may not happen.
Fingers crossed and one knocked on for all of us on that one, because there are long-term implications if that doesn't work out.
So why do we like brook trout? I mean, you mentioned they live in the most beautiful places. I think that's probably one of the reasons I'm so intrigued, because it's really hard to find nasty places where they live. I don't think they can see out of the water, but they live in beautiful places,
right?
Whether they know it or not.
Whether it's off in the woods or, in a mountain stream or, there's in a pond. I mean, there are plenty of ponds all over Massachusetts and New Hampshire that actually have native trout in them. It's a whole other challenge. And I mean, I think we've both seen people do float tubing in ponds and do quite well. Personally, I'm all about the stream game, given a choice. There's something about a mountain stream or a stream going through the woods, the sound that it makes as it tumbles over the stones and through the wood structure. And every river, there's another person, a mutual friend of ours, who says that each river has a different voice. And I've really started to think about that in particular in the last season or two, every time I go out.
Interesting.
Because I don't know about you, at least in 2020, just because of all the madness, there was always sort of a twinge that every time out could be the last time for a little while, for one reason or another, whether, you get sick or just that constant uncertainty. And so I was just sort of trying to pay attention all the more to everything that was going on around me. And one of the things that I really noticed and started to gain an appreciation for was how all of these bodies of water have this different voice, and how they're all saying something similar but different.
It's like a fingerprint. They all have their own identity that's totally unique, even though they're kind of the same.
And I'm sure that this is true of other bodies of water in other parts of the world and country, but I think, again, you know, in New England, we're particularly blessed that there's sort of another layer to it. And that I think you sort of know that this is coming as the historical angle. And the fact that these bodies of water were here at the birth of the country. And that's a pretty unbelievable thing. There's a friend of mine who studies genetics and genealogy in aquaculture. And one time, or in the past year when we went out, he told me the story, and it's in this book. I think the author is, I don't remember his name, so I'm not even going to butcher it or trying to remember it. But the guy talks about the fish of Unkus. Unkus was a Native American, correct term, I hope.
Well, yeah, it's hard to
American Indian, trying to be PC here. Somebody please correct me if I'm wrong. But a chief way back who in particular had a fondness for these fish, which turns out were brook trout. So there's a connection to the earliest days of our history in this land. And think about that however you will, particularly in regards to the people who were here first, and their management of these fish and the waters that they live in. But thinking about when I'm out and on these streams, how, you know, they say nobody steps in the same river twice, because the river is constantly changing, as you are constantly changing. Mm-hmm. But there is history in particular, I think, to these bodies of water and the fish that call them home. You know, there was someone that I talked to years back who, you know, said they worked at Department of Fisheries and Wildlife. And when they were working at Department of Fisheries and Wildlife, there was another old fart who worked there who had been in the business for a while and you know, knew about the fisheries and history and all that jazz. And he said that in theory, or I'm sure it was much more sure of it, I'm still calling it a theory, there is even a particular genetic strain of brook trout called Indian trout that goes all the way back to pre-colonial times and early stocking efforts, because even though a lot of the fish that we catch now are wild and the northeast brook trout is within its native range here in New England.
Right.
They were still stocked in some of these bodies of water, you know, moved from one body to another to expand the population. Mm-hmm. But some are still where they were, where they have been, hopefully would knocked on where they always will be, at least until I'm gone. What happens to them after I'm gone?
Forget about the next generation.
as much as I would, you know.
We have to worry about this year. It's right. Like I do. We both do conservation work, and it's like the long game is decades in conservation work. The short game is years, and it's like this taught us that years are. I mean, they're fluid. They're barely. It's crazy.
This past week has felt like a year. Thank you very much.
I know it, and yet we have these. I mean, I don't know how many years. I don't know when brook trout first started to appear, but they've been here longer than we have, probably.
Mm-hmm. Last ice age.
It's crazy
because they are char. I mean, we call them trout, but they are char. I think brook char just doesn't roll off the tongue quite as easily.
Brook char.
I mean, exactly with the New England accent, it totally does. Brook char.
Brook char guy.
See, that's what we got to do. We got to start, making it slang and colloquial.
Put it.
But
what we're doing to the poor things is we're taking away their, I don't know what, their routine. They would travel. They would go upstream when it got hot to find cold water. They would go downstream into the big rivers when in summer to find food. They traveled, they moved, they did these crazy things. And I know there's one system left in Maine and New Hampshire where they still are allowed to move for many miles. The biologists have talked about it, but I think there's literally one stream left that's unobstructed that allow these brook trout to do what brook trout do. And that's terrifying. I mean, they're all over. There's wild fish everywhere, but there's only in this state one system left that's free for them to do the stuff they do. So while they might be genetically, the same, their habitat has been just chopped up by people. So they'll survive. I'm not so worried about that, but imagine their character has to change, right?
100%. And you got to think, and you're starting to see it now, that dam removal and restoring native and diadromous fish passage it's catching on. More dams are coming out. More people are realizing that, we've made a mistake, a pretty egregious mistake. And these dams are historic, but it's much more important for the ecosystem that these fish be able to move how they're actually supposed to move. We certainly have a long way to go. There's a lot of discussion and fundraising and effort to be put forth. But at the same time, I think that now in 2021, we are miles ahead of where we were when I started fly fishing in 2014, 2015.
Good to think about. Yeah, I always think we're behind, but that's just because I'm a pessimist.
But you're also not wrong for thinking that way. I mean, we've seen a lot of really twisted things that are causing us to make steps backward. But there's also, in conservation, like you said, where everything is on such a long time span or time frame, rather, excuse me, you got to find the positives when you can, because otherwise you get real freaking depressed.
Yes, indeed. And the fact that there are many wild trout out there, they just don't get real big. And the reason they don't get big is because they're confined to their little neighborhoods now, which is just a small stretch of river or a pond or whatever. They don't have anywhere to go to feed to kind of grow up and be, big. They'll eat anything. They're voracious little buggers, but if there's not food, like in the White Mountains here, there's not. The streams are pretty sterile. They don't have a lot to eat. So they're tough. They survive, but they don't get big. And then we have to put the big fish that we grow in the hatchery on top of them for the sportsmen. And it's a crazy situation, but it is what it is. I just wish
for our benefit, right?
Yep. And I don't shun some stocking in certain situations, but in some I do.
And that's something that I've also had to come to terms with, that, for a long time, I'm sure you probably even heard me say, stop stalking, period. I was not a fan, but I've come to gain an appreciation, or at least something of an understanding for why it is necessary in some cases. But we also need to, I feel like as a whole, be doing a greater diligence on the part of, those stalking efforts to ensure that we aren't negatively impacting the habitat that is already there.
Yeah, what little is left, yeah.
Right.
And it's easy to blame stalking, but as we build developments on top of every single wild stream and then call the development whatever it is, pickerel stream, housing, whatever, for rich people, it's not all stalking, but it's all humans, I guess is the name of the game.
Yep.
And then guys like us go out and we don't benefit the fish by poking them in the mouth with a fly, but we appreciate the fish. So are we part of the problem or part of the solution? Who knows?
And then, to take it even the next step further, God forbid we post pictures of our fish on the internet and someone should see them and be able to somehow discern from the background where we might be, and then take conceivably hours of their own time to investigate on Google Earth and say, I know where you were fishing now.
It's a whole different animal.
Look,
the spot burn.
If you want to go through my feed and try and figure out all the spots that I'm posting, because I don't tag locations, I try and be mindful of what's in the background of my shots so that I'm not being, too obvious. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I don't use, certain hashtags that would telegraph what I'm doing all the more clearly. But still, people know me. People know where I like to fish. And some people just guess. And if they guess and they're right, I'm not going to lie to them,
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a difference between introducing people to native populations that have been untouched, and there's the places everybody goes constantly. So
that you can find with the most cursory of Google search, should you put forth the modicum of effort required in order to make said Google search.
Well, that's what's interesting about wild fish is they're not big enough generally to, you get some trophies, 12, 15 inch wild. They're trophies, but people are like, oh, look over here under this dam. There's a, 22 inch stocky. Why would I go after yours? So there's, I don't know.
I think we both know why you and I would choose that 12 to 15 inch brook trout versus a stocked fish. There's something about, we've both seen our fair share of the 4, 5, 6 inch class. And those fish are gorgeous. There's no question about it.
And they're insane. They fight, they attack like nothing I've ever seen. When they're
the amount of force that a 5 to 8 inch fish will put into destroying your streamer or whatever it is that you happen to be throwing is staggering to me.
It is. Yeah, it really is.
They're just, like you said earlier, they are voracious predators. They are opportunistic feeders for the most part. Short of the Swift, which sort of, I know that we're trying not to name systems here, but everyone and their mother knows the Swift.
Which I don't know much about. I haven't fished it, so.
Even the brook trout there are far more selective than any other system that I fish for brook trout.
It's interesting. Is it the competition? Is it the genetics? They're stocked.
The clear, slow water. No, they are wild. The brook trout are wild in the Swift.
Oh.
They stock the rainbows, though some, on rare occasion, you will find a hatchery escapee, and those are really cool. Those look like some rainbows that I've seen up in parts of New Hampshire and Western Massachusetts. That there are wild reproducing rainbows, and they what's the word I'm looking for? Evince a similar situation to a brook trout where they don't really grow that big, but they're so much prettier and fight so much harder for their size. And that's, sorry.
Yeah, the only fish I can compare, I went out west for a month. This last year, I'm going to go out for a couple months. This year is the cutthroat. The cutthroats are kind of the same. in their behavior. The like huge stocked fish. I didn't realize half of Wyoming is stocked, and there's a lot of stocked fish, and people pretend they're not, but they're big, but they're not very exciting. They're just big. But those cutthroats, those natives that are still right around them, are kind of like our brookies. They're insane. They are competing for their food, and they're going to get it. And I love it.
That's amazing. No, I dream of the day that I get to fish more of the country. I mean, part of me has the pipe dream idea of my brother's wedding next October, that I do a cross-country drive and fish along the way. I've got friends in various places from Ohio, Illinois, Wyoming, Oregon, parts in between, that there's plenty of water that I've just never seen, parts of the country I've never seen. Excuse me. And it's of interest. I mean, particularly now when you're telling me about searching for the cutthroat, because they don't have, rather the brook trout that they have out on the West Coast are stocked. Which my only experience with West Coast fishing at this point was we had 3 days in Yosemite a few years ago for my birthday. And we stayed in an area of Yosemite called Lower Pines. We were right on the Merced River. And, you know, the first day we arrive, I'm standing there on the shore refilling my water bottle because I brought a filterator thing. And I'm seeing fish rise. So, of course, I proceed to spend like 6 hours just throwing everything in my fly box that I could think of at these fish. But of course, they're right next to the road, so they weren't touching a gosh darn thing. I'm pretty sure they were rainbows and browns. Nothing really big, but still would have been a thrill to catch right there, you know, in the shadow of El Cap and Half Dome. But a few days later, we drove from an altitude of around 3,000 feet at the campground out of the park, up and around into Tuolumne Meadows, up to 10,000 feet starting altitude, and then hiked another 1,000 feet to some high altitude ponds where, as we were arriving, it was starting to snow and blow. But I had just hiked 1,000 feet in my waders and boots and with my fly gear, so I was going to take some freaking casts, I tell you that. And after a few casts, I got what I thought was a beautiful brook trout out of this high altitude pond. I mean, the colors were just absolutely lit up. The fins were in perfect condition. And getting this fish in the snowstorm at the top of a mountain in California was pretty wild.
Yeah.
On a fly I tied.
That's good stuff. And you tie your own flies, so
doesn't hurt. But back on this coast, like, I've caught so many small fish. I mean, I posted a picture just the other day that you may have seen. This fish was maybe 6 inches, 6-7 inches, but its cheek plate was just, as I cupped my hand underneath it to support it, because for whatever reason with my vision, when the fish is in my hand, I can see it much more clearly. The colors pop more than when it's just in the net. I'm still holding it underwater so it can breathe, but I can just sort of turn its flank towards me so I can get my quick picture. It's still fully wet and breathing the whole time. It's submerged. But I just kept seeing its cheek flash, specifically in colors like pearl flashabou. I saw these colors, like this purple, this green, this blue.
Interesting.
And it was amazing. I was just hypnotized by it. I tried to get a picture, but it was tough.
Yeah, the human eye.
Right. And, it was more just about, I got my couple of quick shots, got the fish back, end the story.
But yet I heard you, I can't remember when, talking about those brook trout in the Cape Cod Canal blending into the rocks. I remember, like, they just sit there and hide. So they're beautiful and flashy, but yet they can, I don't know if they adapt their color or just...
Oh, absolutely. I mean, remember, when they go out to the salt and when they come back, they can change the dominant colors. You know, whether they look more like a resident fish with more of the greens and blacks, bright yellow spots, bright blue halos with red spots, versus chrome in 12 hours.
And that would be interesting for a biologist. How do they know? Does their eye see the color and their body follows, or how does it know?
Salt content, I would imagine, plays.
Oh, you think it's more of an environmental cue?
That would be my guess.
Oh, which would be evolution based, like when they feel the salt.
Mm-hmm. When they spend a predominant amount of time in the salt, just because of like the nutrients that are available and what they eat, or the water that they're swimming in and breathing. I think, that plays a function in their color as much as, I mean, it might very well be that, they see or that they sense that they're in a place where that dark color palette of the gravel on the bottom doesn't need to be matched, and they need to be more invisible. Because think about bait fish in the ocean. What are they most of the time? They're silver.
They're just a cloud of silver, and you hope you're in the middle of the cloud.
Exactly.
When the big fish come a-chomping, they don't have the...
So I haven't really seen it for years, unfortunately. But when I first started fishing in those systems, I was really finding consistently those chrome fish. And they were silver. The blue haloed red spots were gone. The vermiculation on the back was gone. You could just barely see the faintest remnants of the yellow spots.
Interesting.
And the fins were like, how they're normally bright orange?
Mm-hmm.
They were like a pale yellow.
With white tips. Interesting.
Yep.
So we should probably explain to people listening about the native brook trout had access to the ocean. You can call them sea run brook trout. You can call them salters is what they call them here. But they would go out from the rivers, inland rivers. They would follow a path out to the ocean and go out and chow on whatever they could find. Minnows, I don't know what they would eat, but they had access to these systems. Shrimp, yeah, everybody's favorite. Mm-hmm. So in a real uncut environment, the brook trout travel really far, and they go to the ocean, and they change, and then they come back. And that's not quite gone, but it's almost gone, but it's hopefully going to survive. But yeah, they just know. And then, like you said, if it's when they feel the salt or chemical composition, they know to change color to chrome, because they turn into little footballs, like chrome little footballs when they go out to the sea. But you don't see it much, and people don't think about it because, well, we don't have much of it left. But they're really special fish.
And, I keep talking to more and more people as the years go on, the longer I spend actually fishing, that, there are more sea run systems out there. They just aren't publicized the way that the big three down the Cape are. Again, anyone with an internet connection can find those three systems.
Mm-hmm.
But there's stuff conceivably down in Connecticut, in New Hampshire, even up in Maine. I mean, I've heard the talk. I haven't seen it myself, but there's
in Canada. I think Canada.
Oh, absolutely in Canada. But for all intents and purposes, I was keeping it to the crazy U.S. of A. No, absolutely. Canada probably has more salter streams still than the entire continental USA. And I bet the fish, or I know that the fish they get up there are bigger than what we get down here. I've been talking to someone I'm trying to remember where he is. He's not PEI. He's not New Brunswick. He's somewhere up there. He's in one of those islands. And this year, I think he got an 18 sea run, an 18-inch sea run on the fly.
In the salt or in the fresh? In the salt.
In the salt. Like it was chrome.
Wow.
This thing was just a monster. And that is honestly the only thing that has me trying to get my passport status or get my passport back because I let it lapse like a doofus. But that is really all I want it for. I want to go to there and I want to catch those fish. Please and thank you.
But it's the same. I don't think they're brook trout down in Patagonia, right? They're rainbow, but they're sea run rainbow. Are they browns? I can't remember. But there's
in Patagonia there are browns.
There's a sea run component, but we have it here, but barely.
Right.
I know that our state has tried for years to restore a population of sea run, and they failed miserably. I mean, they're putting the same genetic code fish, and now they just dump 2,500 brown trout, and people fish for them, and they call them salters, but they're not. Some do go out; they're being caught out in the bay, out in the ocean, but they're not really performing. They're just going out there and hiding. They hide under boats and they hide under docks. And they're not sea run. They're just poor confused stockies that went out, and they can go to the salt, but they don't know how to do the things that the brook trout seem to know how to do. Follow the patterns or follow the food, I guess. So
right.
It's pretty crazy. But yeah, I would like to go somewhere and see it in action. I know that Mid-Coast Maine might have some living populations. The Cape might have some living populations, but it's getting pretty rare to find.
To put it politely. And now, with everyone and their mother out fishing and banging all these systems all the time, it's all the more imperative that stuff be done to protect, conserve, preserve, make people aware of how special these fish are. It's kind of scary to me, just how many people I see out and about.
Yeah, COVID's not been a friend of, anything. But I know we talked, Jeff from the Sea Run Brook Trout Coalition once said, if you can't name the system, you can't save it, which might be true.
Exactly. That you arguably shouldn't even be fishing it in the first place.
Yeah, that's my second thing. But all right, we name them, but now people get interested in when there's a pandemic, people are just looking for stuff outside and they hammer. And I can't blame them. I would do the same thing. But it's like, okay, when do we save them? When do we go from conservation to preservation? And do we do that? Is it worth it? I don't know.
So, I mean, like I said, or like I mentioned earlier when it was just us talking, I'm in theory working on trying to get certified to be able to install PIT tags. For those who aren't familiar, PIT, P-I-T, stands for Passive Integrated Transponder. And believe it or not, it's actually the same system if you have a dog or a cat who is microchipped. It is the same thing. With that same size tag, it's something about the size of a grain of rice. On certain systems, we are able to track fish, i.e. there are static antennas on the system that when a fish with a tag passes through it, Their tag number is then relayed through the antenna to a computer that logs it and says, fish number XYZ passed through this antenna at this date at this time. And then we can, sort of look at our own data, look at weather patterns, look at tides, etc., and see how that all comes together. But then from taking it one step further, me as an angler, I have access to a pit tag reading wand that was loaned to me by the Sea Run Brook Trout Coalition, who I volunteer with. And when I am out fishing down there, I am also gathering data on these fish. I'm scanning to see if they have a tag. If they do or if they don't, I try to get a length measurement on them in millimeters, which is more precise. We get pictures of them, of any discerning feature, and then we let them go. Just a quick little interaction. But the aim is in the future that I will be able to apply the tags to the fish that don't have them, because that's data that we're not getting.
Mm-hmm. What what percentage of the fish do you think that you're finding are tagged? Like 10% or 50, or are they the same fish? Or
personally, that the percentage of fish that I am catching that are tagged versus not tagged fish represent maybe like a quarter of the fish that I catch.
So,
which there's certainly a lot of tags out there, but there's also plenty of fish who aren't tagged at all.
Right, and plenty of striper chowing down on the tagged fish to take them out of the population.
Exactly.
It's not just anglers.
Right. There's absolutely natural factors, and it's not just the striper. There's heron, there's osprey, there's seal, there's otter. The list goes on. There's so many factors. There's the drought, there's pollution, and what's the word? Eutrophication that happens to streams where there's just too many nutrients and algae takes over. There's so many factors that work against these fish, and that they are somehow still here today. Speaks a little bit to their resilience, but also speaks to the incredible work that's been done, particularly over the last few years.
Right. Yeah. There's some people. My foray into conservation work is it's really hard for me because you have to set your goals in decades, not hours, and I just don't have the brain for it because I can't see the results. I get discouraged, blah blah blah.
Absolutely.
But luckily there's some people that know the long game and figure it out. So I like doing field work, and I like fixing things or building things or taking samples, but when it comes to the politics and the long game, I'm not the one. It took me a while to figure that out, but I'm like, it's not me.
Politics is not an easy game to play, and there's a lot of duality in it. It's definitely not where I shine either. I still try and go to my TU meetings, my local chapter TU meetings, make my voice heard, or at least pay attention to what's going on, so I'm aware of what's happening. I know, like tomorrow, I'm going out with Jeff Day. Actually, we're going to take the chapter's drone up, and we're going to do a survey on a system. This is sort of like the golden time while all the trees are down, and you can see through all the branches and get a clearer idea from above of what's actually happening in the system. So we're going to try and do that. But something that I've been trying to do this winter is I've been trying to scout and find other systems that I can take my clients to during this season.
So there's the double-edged sword is you also target these poor little wonderful critters for profit.
Exactly. But at the same time, as much as I am profiting off them being there, I try and make, as many donations as I can to groups that are doing the righteous work, and make sure that focus is brought to organizations that are doing better work than I. to ensure that these fish are still here.
Right. And I think when you introduce people to them and teach them that they're special, it's a lot different than, oh, I went to this dumb stream and caught these little dumb fish and whatever.
And that's sort of my hope too, is to bring focus to these fish and how beautiful and special that they are, in the hopes of, making people aware that, yeah, these are fantastic fish and we should care about them and protect them, and maybe pay a little bit more attention to the health of our waterways, because brook trout are a fantastic barometer of the health of a waterway. If there's brook trout in the water, chances are it's fairly clean. If there's no trout, then you probably have an issue.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of my thought on that.
Yeah, it's a great topic, but we sure have touched on some issues here.
Covered the full gamut.
We were going to bloviate about how great brook trout are, but it always ends up in a complex discussion. Just does. Can't stop it.
And I think that's both a good and a bad thing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm certainly one who has talked about the importance of just having fishing be fishing, just appreciate. And that's, I think that's where we started, just the beauty of nature and these incredible places where these fish exist. But then you start to think on that a little more, and you start to see more as you yourself spend time out in the field. And unfortunately, I think we're all aware that there are a lot of issues at hand that require more hands, more eyes, more attention. And, it isn't a bad thing that we're talking about these problems. It's just like bringing someone out to the stream and actually showing them the fish and the places where they exist. It's important work.
And what are your top 5 brookie flies?
My top 5 brookie flies. I know you know this, but I don't know if everyone listening knows this. I'm an all streamers guy when it comes to brook trout.
I don't know if I knew that. You don't use dries at all?
When it comes to brook trout, particularly in New England and the way that I like to fish, 100% of the time I am using a streamer.
Oh, I thought whenever we fished, it was just not dry fly season, but I didn't know that. Oh, interesting. Good to know.
So, believe it or not, one of the few times that I use a dry fly during the year is when I come up to the White Mountains at the end of the summer, and go to the lakes and fish up, up in northern and central New Hampshire. There are streams that are a bit more open overhead that really allow me to do the casting that I like to do, fishing a hopper dropper or a dry dropper rig that I haven't really found as much enjoyment fishing down here in Massachusetts as the tight quarters stuff that I really like doing for brook trout. So top 5 streamers, if I had to only have 5, first one is the Deadly Empty Shiner, which I tie a variant on. Shorter tail, weight the shank, different colors, yada, yada, yada. That fly catches every fish that swims. But I tie that mostly in a size 12 and a size 10. So does that count as 2 or is that just 1?
That's 1.
So the Shiner, the light and the dark Edson Tiger, both must-haves. Again, I actually have taken to almost always tying that in size 10 because I get the Edson cheeks, and those just don't really work on the smaller hooks. But I tie them on like 6 and 7 times long shanks. And that's a killer fly, or those are both killer flies. So that's 3. Shiner, Tigers. The one-eyed poacher. Can't be without the one-eyed poacher. That's like a trout flat wing kind of sort of fly. Again, on a long shank hook. but the wing, going up from the shank, you've got, at least the original recipe is a little bit of yellow bucktail, a little bit of red bucktail, yellow marabou, and then a mallard or a wood duck flank feather tied on top of that, flat, so that from underneath it has a wider profile. And so many fish, the big fish hang down low, the bait fish is up here. As it comes over, cast that bigger silhouette, big fish says, oh, this is a bigger meal, I'm going to eat it. So that's 4, one-eyed poacher. And then 5, number 5. It has to be a brook trout fly, right?
It could be any fly, but the striper fly won't do.
No,
be something you'd use
in a stream.
4 is okay.
The shiner is weighted. The tigers and the poacher both have the Edson cheek, so they cant down a little bit, but they aren't really weighted. I'm going to do another weighted fly, and I'm going to say the slump buster.
Oh, the slump buster, yeah.
Because if you're in a slump,
yeah, nothing with a little tail, a little squirrel tail, right? Slump buster,
squirrel tail, flash, cone head, as something about those pine squirrel strips just wreck. It's got so much motion in it. That one material, it's incredible. It's such a simple and deadly fly.
Well, elk-hair caddis, depending size matters, but elk-hair caddis always. I use a sculpin snack, which isn't much different than a slump buster cone head, but it's got legs and it's got UV flash. Drives them crazy. A Duracell, which is a jig head nymph with purple UV flash.
And the CDC. Can't forget the CDC in there.
And a, I don't know what to call it, but a caddis emerger. My buddy Tom, who's a guide, makes his own, and he got me settled on it. He calls it, I don't remember Tom's CDC emerger, but he put some frog's fanny on it and let it lay in the surface, and it's unbeatable. And then a Chernobyl ant. I don't know what the hell they think it is. It's taken me a long time to figure it out, but they love that, and I don't think they think it's a grasshopper, which is what it's definitely not an ant. I don't know what they think it is, but they love
lunch.
yeah, meat fly.
Exactly. So I'm gonna add a +1 for the Chernobyl, the chubby Chernobyl.
Oh, the chubby
fly.
Chernobyl.
Yeah. So that thing is just, I love that fly. That is a great terrestrial. I've caught some really nice fish on that fly. In particular, one of my favorite moves up in New Hampshire, you throw that fly, the chubby Chernobyl, right at the edge of a rock that is sitting in some white water.
Mm-hmm.
Browns like to sit right there. Oh, yeah.
It's either they take it or they don't.
Right. The second that thing hits the water, it is bananas.
I think that's what does it. Like, it's so fast and it's so intense, and they fly through the air after it. And the little guys can't put it in their mouth most of the time, which is even better. You don't actually catch them. You just watch them attack.
Smack the thing.
Smack it multiple times. It's a great fly. And then you can drop a trailer off it, a little nymph or whatever. But just watching them hammer those is joy.
Hopper dropper, baby.
Well, great.
Can't go wrong.
Well, let's stop talking about our favorites for a bit and let people have a break. And I appreciate you talking to me and the Fish Nerds. Put in a little plug for yourself. You do flies, custom flies. You do custom rods. You do trips. Your guide. You do all these things. Just tell us a little bit about what you're planning 2021 with all the chaos, and we'll call it a day.
So yeah, like you said, I guide for brook trout, carp, and striped bass, all on the fly, all catch and release. I build custom rods, fly rod, spin rod, casting rod. I work out of a shop here in Massachusetts, Cody's, down in Leicester, COTE, and Guide Trip Flies Rod. That's the deal. And then in 2021, just books are open. Book your trip as soon as possible, so that way we can make sure we get you out during the prime time. And it'll be a pleasure to have you out on the water and show you these spectacular fish.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff Klain. Good talking to you, and we'll do this again soon.
Thank you, Rich. A pleasure.
Thanks, boys.
Take
Very
care.
informative. I learned a lot about Brook Trout tonight. Hope you enjoyed yourselves, and thank you everyone for listening to the Fish Nerds podcast. That's it. Special thanks to our families for supporting us while we podcast and do nerdy things. Big fat thanks to Rich Collins and Jeff from Brackish Flies. Big thank you to the Crappie Hippie, John King, and also to Tim Bete and Tim Bete's daughter for that music, Grace, who sang the Lure Love theme. I also want to make sure we thank Wally Pleasant for our theme for the Fish Nerds podcast. So until next time, follow the code of the Fish Nerds, spawn early and often. Never trust a free lunch with strings attached, and swim against the current every chance you get. Fish Nerds, out of here.
Hey guys, look at that adorable town. There's the classic New England church, the quaint village store, all surrounding that beautiful pond. The sparkling snow-frosted pines. Oh, look, they're ice skating, and all those folks ice fishing. This is God's country.
Let's go ice fishing this weekend, please, Dad.
Yeah, let's try something new. We already have all of our warm stuff for skiing. Plus, the kid is actually making plans to put down her tablet for a change.
It's certainly something different, and it sounds really fun. But how?
Hey, I know a few guys. Have you ever thought about hitting the hard water but don't know where to start? I'm Clay, licensed fishing guide, and my partner Vinny and I can get you on and off the ice safely. All you need is warm clothes and a fishing license, and the Fish Nerds Guide Service will do the rest. Go to fishnerds.com for pricing and information.
Whether you're fly fishing in a stream, getting those ankles wet, or deep in the ocean casting nets, Fish Nerds. Fish Nerds. Fish Nerds. It's a podcast. Just for the halibut. Fried in a basket or broiled in a pan. Eat it raw like you're in Siam. Fish Nerds. Fish Nerds.